If you followed the rules, got an education, built a career, avoided reckless spending, and still feel financially behind, this is not a personal failure. It is a structural problem. Millions of people did what previous generations were told was the safe path, yet their net worth, stability, and future security are weaker than expected. Here is the core issue. The system that rewarded discipline and long-term planning in the past no longer delivers the same outcomes. But most people are still operating with outdated assumptions about how money, work, and wealth accumulation function today. Let's define what doing everything right usually means. A typical path looks like this: 4 years of college, often financed with student loans, a stable professional job, steady income growth, contributing to a 401k, paying bills on time, avoiding obvious financial mistakes. On paper, this should lead to upward mobility. In practice, the math increasingly does not work. Start with income versus costs. Between 2000 and 2024, real median wages in the US grew slowly, while core expenses grew much faster. Housing costs are the clearest example. Adjusted for inflation, median home prices have roughly doubled since the early 2000s, while median household income has not. Rent followed a similar trajectory. If housing consumes 35–45% of take-home pay instead of the historical 25–30%, the capacity to save and invest collapses even with good income. Education was supposed to be the equalizer. Instead, it became a financial drag. The average student loan balance for borrowers in their 30s is now over $30,000. Servicing that debt reduces monthly cash flow during the most critical wealth-building decade. Even a modest $400 monthly payment, invested instead at a 7% annual return over 30 years, would grow to roughly $450,000. That opportunity cost is rarely discussed, but it is real. Then there is asset inflation. Financial assets, stocks, real estate, private equity, appreciated faster than wages for decades. Those who already owned assets benefited. Those who entered later, even with discipline and savings, face much higher entry prices. This creates a timing disadvantage that hard work alone cannot overcome. Retirement systems add another layer of misunderstanding. Many people assume that consistent 401k contributions guarantee security. But contribution limits, market volatility, late starts due to debt, and rising healthcare costs mean that the median retirement balance remains far below what is required. As of recent data, the median 401k balance for people in their early 40s is well under what most financial models consider adequate, even after years of steady contributions. The psychological trap is subtle. People believe that following rules equals progress. When progress does not materialize, they internalize blame or assume they simply need more time. Meanwhile, structural pressures continue compounding quietly: higher fixed costs, lower purchasing power, delayed asset ownership, and increased personal risk shifted from institutions to individuals. This is why so many financially responsible people feel stuck, not because they failed to plan, but because they planned for a system that no longer exists. Understanding this mismatch is the first step. Before discussing solutions, it is necessary to clearly see why the traditional formula no longer delivers the outcomes it once did. To understand why this problem persists, it helps to separate three forces that interact with each other: income structure, financial behavior, and the absence of a coherent system. Most people focus on behavior alone. Budget better, save more, invest consistently, but behavior cannot compensate for structural constraints indefinitely. Start with income structure. For a large share of educated professionals, income growth is linear while expenses are exponential. Salaries typically increase by 2 to 4% per year, often tied to performance reviews or job changes. Meanwhile, major cost categories, housing, healthcare, insurance, childcare, education, are not linear. They arrive in steps: a rent increase of 15%, a daycare bill of $1,500 per month, Or a health insurance premium jump of $400 per month can erase years of incremental raises in a single year. This creates a false sense of progress. On paper, income rises. In reality, discretionary cash flow remains flat or declines. When savings stagnate, people assume they are temporarily behind, not structurally constrained. Now consider behavior. Most financially responsible adults do exactly what they are told. They keep emergency funds, avoid high interest debt, contribute to retirement accounts, and maintain credit scores. These behaviors are necessary, but they are defensive. They prevent collapse. They do not guarantee advancement. Here is a simple scenario. Take a 35-year-old professional earning $95,000 annually. After taxes, healthcare, rent, student loans, transportation, and basic living costs, they might have $800 per month available. They contribute $500 to a 401k and save $300 in cash. This looks disciplined, but after inflation, fees, and market volatility, their net worth growth is slow. They are stable, not advancing. Now compare that to someone who entered the housing market 10 years earlier with similar income but lower entry prices. Their mortgage payment is lower, their housing equity grows automatically, and their cash flow improves over time. The difference is not intelligence or effort, it is timing and asset access. This leads to the third issue: lack of system level thinking. Many people operate with isolated financial actions rather than a coordinated strategy. They save without a clear capital allocation plan. They invest without understanding risk-adjusted returns. They focus on tax-advantaged accounts without accounting for liquidity needs or future flexibility. Standard advice reinforces this fragmentation. Max your 401k. Cut discretionary spending. Wait for the market. These recommendations assume stable conditions and long-time horizons without disruption. They also assume that the primary problem is discipline. For many people, discipline is not the issue. Structure is. Another common failure is over-reliance on income as the solution. People chase higher salaries believing that one more raise will fix everything, but higher income often comes with higher lifestyle costs, higher tax exposure, and more complexity, without a system to convert income into durable assets. Income alone does not create security. The result is a generation that is financially responsible but strategically under-equipped. They are running faster on a treadmill that is accelerating. The standard playbook still emphasizes effort, patience, and compliance while ignoring access, leverage, and structural efficiency. This gap between good behavior and poor outcomes is not accidental. It is the product of an environment where old rules persist in public advice, while the underlying economic mechanics have shifted. Recognizing this disconnect is critical before discussing what actually works under current conditions. The situation does not deteriorate overnight. It worsens gradually through a set of common decisions that appear reasonable in isolation but are damaging in combination. These are not reckless mistakes. They are default choices made without a system. The first major mistake is confusing stability with progress. Many people assume that as long as they are employed, paying bills, and contributing to retirement accounts, they are moving forward. In reality, stability only means risk is deferred, not eliminated. If net worth growth barely outpaces inflation, time works against you, not for you. Consider a simple projection. A household saves $6,000 per year and earns a 5% real return after inflation and fees. After 10 years, that totals roughly $75,000. After 20 years, about $200,000. That sounds reasonable until you compare it to future liabilities. At current trends, healthcare, housing, and basic retirement costs easily exceed that amount. The math does not close the gap. The second mistake is overconcentration in illiquid, tax-deferred accounts. Retirement accounts are valuable, but they are not flexible. Money locked away until age 59-12 cannot be used to acquire assets, reposition during economic shifts, or absorb shocks without penalties. Many people reach their 40s with most of their net worth inaccessible, while their highest opportunity years pass by. Over 15-20 years, this creates a compounding constraint. Capital exists, but cannot be deployed when it matters. The result is dependence on continued employment and market conditions staying favorable. That is not resilience, it is exposure. The third mistake is delaying asset ownership while waiting for better conditions. People wait to buy property, invest beyond retirement accounts, or start scalable income streams until they feel fully ready. In the meantime, asset prices rise faster than savings. A home that costs $350,000 today may cost $500,000 in 10 years. Waiting does not reduce risk, it increases the entry barrier. A fourth mistake is relying on income growth as the primary solution. Income helps, but it does not solve structural inefficiency. A raise from $90,000 to $120,000 often comes with higher taxes, lifestyle inflation, and higher fixed costs. If savings rates remain unchanged and capital allocation does not improve, the long-term outcome barely shifts. This can be illustrated clearly. Scenario A, income grows 30% over 10 years. Savings rate stays at 8%. Assets are passive and illiquid. Scenario B, income grows only 10%, but savings are strategically allocated into productive, accessible assets with higher after-tax efficiency. Over 15-20 years, Scenario B often produces higher net worth and lower dependency on labor. The fifth mistake is outsourcing thinking to generic advice. Standard rules are designed for simplicity, not optimization. They assume average conditions and long timelines. Following them blindly leads to average outcomes, which are increasingly insufficient. The long-term consequence of these mistakes is not poverty, but stagnation. After 5 years, people feel behind peers. After 10 years, options narrow. After 20 years, dependency becomes clear. Dependency on employment, markets, and policy decisions. The core issue is not income. It is decision architecture. Without intentional choices about liquidity, asset access, and capital efficiency, even strong earnings result in fragile outcomes. This is where most people quietly fall behind by making safe decisions that compound into long-term vulnerability. The solution is not a single product, account, or tactic. It is a shift from isolated financial actions to a system that prioritizes flexibility, capital efficiency, and optionality. The goal is not to maximize short-term returns, but to reduce dependency on any single income source or assumption about the future. The core principle is this: money should remain useful before it becomes inaccessible. That changes how saving, investing, and planning are structured. Start with cash flow control, not extreme budgeting. The objective is to consistently generate surplus capital, even if the amount is modest. For most households, this means designing expenses so that at least 15 to 20% of gross income can be directed intentionally. Not all of it goes into retirement accounts. Some of it remains liquid or semi-liquid. Next is capital layering. Instead of sending all long-term savings into tax-deferred accounts, capital is divided by function. One layer is short-term liquidity, cash reserves that cover uncertainty and prevent forced selling. Another layer is flexible investment capital, money that can be deployed into assets when opportunities arise. The final layer is long-term compounding, retirement accounts, and other vehicles designed for distant time horizons. This structure solves a key problem: access. When capital is available, decisions can be made based on opportunity rather than necessity. For example, during market drawdowns, someone with flexible capital can invest at lower valuations instead of watching from the sidelines. Asset selection also changes. The focus moves away from passive accumulation only and toward assets that either generate cash flow, improve purchasing power, or provide inflation protection. This does not mean high risk. It means understanding how assets behave under different conditions. For example, assets that produce income can support reinvestment regardless of market sentiment. Risk is managed through diversification of function, not complexity. Instead of chasing returns, the system spreads exposure across different economic outcomes. Employment income covers stability. Assets provide growth. Liquidity provides control. No single component is expected to do everything. This approach is stable because it reduces reliance on assumptions. It does not require constant salary growth, perfect market timing, or uninterrupted employment. It also adapts over time. As income rises, the system scales. As responsibilities increase, liquidity buffers adjust. As markets change, capital can be reallocated without penalties. Importantly, this is not about abandoning traditional tools like 401ks. It is about placing them in context. Tax advantages are useful, but only when balanced with access and flexibility. A dollar that grows slightly slower but remains usable can be more valuable than a dollar that grows faster but is locked away. The mechanics are simple but disciplined. Control cash flow, layer capital by purpose, prioritize access, and allocate intentionally. Over time, this creates resilience. Progress becomes measurable not just by net worth, but by reduced vulnerability and increased choice. This is how financially responsible people stop falling behind, not by taking more risk, but by building systems that work under real world conditions. When the problem is stripped down to its core, the issue becomes clear. Most people who did everything right did not fail because of lack of discipline or income. They failed because their financial decisions were never organized into a system. They optimized individual actions while ignoring how those actions interacted over time. A functional system has four elements: controlled cash flow, layered capital, intentional access, and periodic reallocation. Each element has a clear role. First, cash flow is treated as a planning tool, not a leftover. Instead of saving whatever remains at the end of the month, savings are defined upfront. A realistic target for many households is 15 to 20% of gross income, adjusted gradually if needed. This is not about deprivation, it is about consistency and predictability. Second, capital is layered by purpose. One layer covers liquidity and short-term resilience. One layer is flexible investment capital. One layer is long-term compounding through retirement accounts. The mistake most people make is collapsing all three into one category. When capital has no defined role, it becomes either inaccessible or inefficient. Third, access is treated as a feature, not a flaw. Some money is allowed to remain usable even if it grows more slowly. This reduces dependency on income and prevents missed opportunities. It also lowers risk because forced decisions are often the most expensive ones. Fourth, allocation is reviewed periodically, not emotionally. Capital is adjusted based on life stage, risk exposure, and opportunity, not headlines or fear. This replaces reactive behavior with structured decision making. What changes over time with this approach is measurable. After 1 year, the main shift is clarity. Cash flow improves, stress decreases, and decisions become deliberate. Net worth may not change dramatically yet, but vulnerability decreases. After 5 years, optionality appears. Capital is no longer entirely locked away. Assets begin contributing instead of just accumulating. Income dependence starts to decline, even if total income stays the same. After 10 years, the difference becomes structural. Two individuals with similar incomes can end up with radically different outcomes. One remains dependent on employment and market timing. The other has flexibility, buffers, and choices. The gap is not created by higher returns, but by better architecture. What should be done now is straightforward. First, map current capital by access and purpose. Identify how much is liquid, how much is flexible, and how much is locked away. Second, adjust future contributions so that all three layers are funded. This may mean contributing slightly less to tax-deferred accounts in exchange for building accessible capital. This is not a rejection of retirement planning. It is a correction of imbalance. Third, define a simple review schedule. Once or twice per year is enough. The goal is alignment, not constant optimization. Finally, stop evaluating progress only by income or account balances. Evaluate it by reduced dependency, increased flexibility, and decision range. This framework does not promise rapid wealth or immunity from economic cycles. What it offers is stability under uncertainty. That is the missing element for the generation that followed the rules and still fell behind. When decisions are structured instead of isolated, outcomes change quietly but permanently.